To define array, I'm going to use two subscript. One is row and one is my column. The elements of two-dimensional arrays are represented as rows and columns. If I consider one-dimensional array, I'm going to have only one index. For that reason, I'm going to use only one for loop. Hello to all, a warm welcome to my new session on arrays. I am Revati from the Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram, First Grade College, Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. So dear student, before going to start my today's session, let me to recall the things what I have discussed in my last session. So dear student, in my last session of this chapter, I started with one-dimensional array. That means what is one-dimensional array? So what is one-dimensional array? Array with one index. That means if I want to access any element which is stored in an array, I can able to access those elements with the help of index. So I'm going to have only one index, that is known as one-dimensional array. Along with that, I have covered how to declare one-dimensional array. Along with that, how to initialize one-dimensional array. Along with that, I have discussed how to access one-dimensional array and memory representation of one-dimensional array. And from the examination point of view, all these are very important topic. Anyway, dear student, let's see the today's agenda of this session. So dear student, at the beginning, I'm going to deal with two-dimensional array. That means what is two-dimensional array? Along with that, I'm going to deal with how to declare two-dimensional array. Along with that, I'm going to deal with how to initialize two-dimensional array, how to access two-dimensional array elements and memory representation. Along with that, I'm going to deal with multi-dimensional array. Anyway, dear student, let's start with today's topic, that is two-dimensional array. So here, as the name itself indicates, that array with two dimensions. So what is this dimension? That's nothing but index or indices or subscript. That means to define array, I'm going to use two subscript. One is row and one is my column. And the best example for two-dimensional arrays are matrix. So any matrix representation is example for two-dimensional array. Now it is an array. It is an array means what? It's nothing but collection of similar data are grouped under same name is known as array. So it is also an array which each element is accessed. So each elements are accessed by using two subscript or two index. And the subscript represent the position of the elements in the array. So here, if I have A of 2 and 1, this indicates that the position of the element. So the position present at the location A of 2 and 1. The elements of two-dimensional arrays are represented as rows and columns. So dear student, if I consider two-dimensional array, the elements are represented in the forms of rows as well as columns, and to identify the element which is stored in the two-dimensional array, I must know array index, that is, I must know row number as well as column number, and this is the best example for two-dimensional array. For example, if I consider this one, I have 0 to n minus 1 column. Along with that, I have 0 to m minus 1 rows. Now, let me to write simple example here. If I write A of 2 into 2, so it is 2 cross matrix. That means this is the example for 2 cross matrix. So, I can able to have 2 rows and I can able to have 2 columns. So, dear student, please remember here that always my first index is going to represent row and always my second index is going to represent column. This is the way I can able to define two-dimensional array. Followed by, I'm going to have how to declare two-dimensional array. Till now, we discussed what is two-dimensional array. So, what is two-dimensional array? If I want to access any element which is stored in the array, I require two subscript or two index. That is known as two-dimensional array. Now, how can I declare two-dimensional array? So, dear student, please remember here. First, I'm going to write data type. So, I want to specify which type of data or which type of item I'm going to use. Along with that, I want to write the array name. So, I want to specify the array name. Along with that, I want to specify the size. I want to specify the size. So, dear student, please remember here that the first size is always my row and the second size is always going to indicate column. Now, a two-dimensional arrays can be identified by specifying data type. So, any two-dimensional arrays can be identified by using data type. So, what is data type here? That is nothing but way used to identify particular kind of data or item. For example, I can have int or I can able to have float or character, etc. So, here a two-dimensional array can be identified by specifying the data type of the element followed by name of the array followed by the number of rows as well as the number of columns. So, here I am having data type. Along with that, I have specified array name. Along with that, I have specified size of row as well as size of the column. So, here the row size and column size of the array must be constant. So, dear student, please remember here, while defining array, the size of the array must be constant. It may be one-dimensional array or two-dimensional array or n-dimensional array. And whatever the index I'm going to specify, that must be whole number. In the sense it is integer. I cannot have any fractional index number. The row size and column size should be separately enclosed within square bracket. Now, I'm going to have the syntax, that is, at the beginning, I want to write the data type. Along with that, I want to specify the array name. Along with that, I want to specify the row size as well as column size. And at the end, I'm going to place the semicolon. Now, I'm going to have how to initialize two-dimensional array. Now, I'm going to discuss how can I initialize two-dimensional array. So, here, similar to one-dimensional array, I can able to initialize two-dimensional array. So dear student, if I consider one-dimensional array, this is the example I have. Say it is 3 and I am going to write 1, 2, 3. Okay, now I want to replace this one with two-dimensional array. So how can I? Int a of. So it is 1 into 3 cross matrix equal to, okay, both are same. See here it is a of 3. So I am going to have 3 elements. This is my one-dimensional array. If I go with this one, this is my two-dimensional array. So I have 1 row and 3 columns or 3 fields. So this is the example for two-dimensional array. That is 2 row and 3 column. Along with that, it's of type integer and A is array name. Now for this, I want to construct the table. So dear student, according to the given example, I have 2 rows and 3 columns. So 2 rows means what? I can able to have 0 row and first row. And if I consider column, I can able to have 3 columns, and array index always starts from 0. So 0, 1 and 2. So these are my column and 1 and 2 are nothing but my row. Now here I have the values like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Now first what I want to do, I want to increment column. So here first I'll write the matrix representation 0, 1, here 1, here it is 0, 1, here it is 2. So 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2. Now 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2. This is my matrix index. Similarly, I want to place the value here. So first I have 0th row and 0th column. In the place of 0th row and 0th column, I am going to place 1 and I am going to increment column by 1. Now in the next column, I am going to place 2. In the next column, it is 3. But row remains as it is. Now row is going to increment by 1. Now I am in first row. So 1, 0, I am going to place 4. Now I am going to increment column by 1. 1, 1. In the place of 1, 1, I am going to store 5. Now column is incremented by 1. Now in the place of 1, 2, I am going to store 6. This is the way I can able to store the elements in my two-dimensional array. So here, where A is a two-dimensional array which contains 2 rows and 3 columns, and these are assigned. How it is assigned? That is, in the place of A of 0, 0, I am going to place 1. In 0, 1, it is 2. In A of 0, 2, it is 3. Now, row is going to incremented by 1. That is, A of 1, 0, 4. A of 1, 1, it is 5. A of 1, 2, it is 6. Now, if the values are missing in the, that means if the values are not assigned in my array, then 0 is going to placed automatically. Now tell me who is going to place 0. That is the job of the compiler, is to place 0. Now how can I access the elements which is stored in the two-dimensional array? Now the procedure is similar to one-dimensional array, but if I consider one-dimensional array, I am going to have only one index. For that reason, I am going to use only one for loop. If I go with two-dimensional array, here I have two index. One is for row and one is for column. Now, to access elements which is stored in two-dimensional array, I require two for loop. So here I am going to use two for loop, one for row and one for column. Now, see here. My first for loop is always it is row, and if I consider second for loop, it is always column. So here, what is my example here? It is int a of 2 cross 3. 2 cross 3 means what? It is 6 element. So I have 2 rows and 3 columns. So here 2 is nothing but my row and 3 is nothing but my column. And while reading, I want to specify both the index, that is row index as well as column index. If I consider one-dimensional array, I have only one index, so only one for loop. And while reading input, I have only one index. But if I consider two-dimensional array, I have two index. So here, while reading, I want to specify row value as well as column value. There's nothing but row position as well as column position. And remember one thing, that my first loop is always outer for loop and my second loop is always inner for loop. I'm going to have two-dimensional array element. That means how can I read two-dimensional array element as well as how can I write two-dimensional array element. Now, dear student, to read two-dimensional array element, what I want to do? I want to define some variable. So, what I will do? I will take int a of 2 and a of 3, comma, n, m, I and j. Now, dear student, please remember here that n is nothing but my row as well as this one column. Okay, so I'm going to specify the limit. Now, if I consider I, it is my row index, and if I consider j, j is nothing but my column index. Now, dear student, here I'm going to write the message to the user that printf enter the size of the array. Size of the array. Okay, for example, say I want to read 2 rows and 3 columns and I want to specify 2 and 3. For that, I'm going to write scanf %d because 2 index ampersand n and ampersand m. Okay, now I got the size, that is row size is 2 and column size is 3. Now what I want to do? I want to read the element. So here I have 2 index. For that reason, I'm going to use 2 for loop. One is outer for loop and one is inner for loop. And outer for loop is always going to represent row value and inner for loop is always going to represent column value. To illustrate how to read two-dimensional array as well as how to write two-dimensional array, I'm going to have the example program. And dear student, if I consider this program, here I have written half and in my next slide I have written half program. So what I will do, I'm going to start writing program here. So what is the program I want to write here? That is, I want to read two-dimensional array. At the same time, I want to display the content. So how I can able to write here? That is hash include stdio.h, then hash include conio.h, and my actual program execution starts from void main program. Okay, now dear student, think that I have 4 elements, 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now I want to read 4 elements. How can I read? So here I have 4 elements and I want to represent that in the form of two-dimensional array. For example, it is 2 cross 2 matrix 1, 2 and 3, 4. I want to represent in the form of matrix. So I have 2 rows and I have 2 columns. Now dear student, I'm going to declare some variables. Say it's of type integer and my array name is A, 2 row and 2 column, M, N, I and J. So dear student, listen here. M is nothing but my row and N is nothing but my column. And to represent row index, I'm going to consider I, and to represent column index, I'm going to consider J. Now, I'm going to display the message to the user that printf enter row value and column value. So I want to specify the row size as well as column size. And I'll write scanf %d. So I'm using 2 elements, that is row and column. For that I want to write format specifier %d twice. And I'll write ampersand of m and ampersand of n. Okay, fine. Now, dear student, see here, I'm going to display the message to the user that enter array element one by one, and I'm going to close. Okay, now see here, I have 2 rows and 2 columns. For that, I'm going to use for loop for I equal to 0, because always my array index starts from 0. So I equal to 0, I less than m semicolon I plus plus. Now for j equal to 0, j less than n, j plus plus. Now tell me what is m here? M is nothing but row, and what about j? J is nothing but my column. So it is my column index and this is my row index. Now I'm going to read the element, that is 1, 2, 3, 4. That means the for loop is going to execute how many times? That is 4 times. That means outer for loop is going to execute 2 times and inner for loop is going to execute 2 times. Total it is 4 times. Now dear student, I want to display the output. How can I? So I'm going to give the message to the user that printf enter the array element, and I'm going to display the element one by one. Now once again, I'm going to use 2 for loop here, that is 1 for row and 1 for column. If I consider this example, this is my 0th row and first row, 0th column, first column. Initially I is 0. Okay, that means it is going to point 0th row 0 less than m. M is 2, it is true. So the control enters into inner for loop. In my inner for loop, j is 0. 0, that means 0th column, 0 less than 2, true. So what I want to do? I want to read the element which is present at the index 0, 0 and which is present at the index 0, 0, what? It is 1. So I'm going to read 1. That means I'm going to display 1. That means I'm going to read the content which is stored in the 0, 0 index and I'm going to display the content to the user. So I'm going to write printf a of I and j. Now what's going to happen? Now j is going to incremented by 1. Now j is 1. 1 less than 2, it is true. Now j is going to incremented by 1. Now j is 1. 1 less than 2, it is true. So what is present at the location 0, 1? It is 2. So I'm going to display 2. Now j is incremented by 1. Now j is 2. 2 less than 2. 2 less than 2. So the condition get false or get failed. Now the control transferred to outer for loop. Now outer for loop, that is I is going to incremented by 1. Now I is 1. 1 less than 2. It is true. So the control comes into the inner for loop. Now j is 0. 0 less than 2. It is true. So now what I want to print? At the location 1, 0, what is present? That is 3. Now I want to print 3. So I'm going to print 3. Now j is incremented by 1. Now j is 1. 1 less than 2. It is true. Now what I want to display? That is the content which is present at the location 1, 1. I'm going to print. So I'm going to print 4. Now j is incremented by 1. Now j is 2. 2 less than 2. The condition is false. So the control comes to outer for loop. Now I is incremented by 1. Now I is 2. 2 less than 2. The condition is failed. So the control directly transferred to the get ch. So this is the way I can able to read two-dimensional array element as well as I can able to display two-dimensional array element. Now I'm going to have multi-dimensional arrays. So what is this multi-dimensional array? Arrays with n dimension. So what is n dimension? That is n number of index is known as a multi-dimensional array. So multi-dimensional array is an array of n dimensions. So an array is also called multi-dimensional array. So here I'm going to have the syntax, that is data type, array name, and I'm going to have n number of index or subscript. So here S1 is the size of the index. So here S1, S2, S3, Sn are the size of the array. So dear student, in my today's session, you got more information about what is two-dimensional array, how to initialize two-dimensional array, how to access two-dimensional array. Along with example, I have discussed how to use two-dimensional array. Along with that, I have covered multi-dimensional arrays. So dear student, let's meet in the next session with new topic called string. So dear student, in my next session, I'm going to deal with strings. Until that, keep watching and keep learning. Thank you.